Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another SandStorm meetup. Today we are joined by Sean from Rev Racing. How you doing today or tonight, wherever you are, Sean?
It's a morning for me coming
Morning
from
for
Hong
you.
Kong. So yes, I'm doing very well. Thanks for bringing me along.
Awesome. No, thank you for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. I'm actually really excited for this. Because Rev Racing, it looks like an awesome game. And excited to talk to you about it.
Cool.
Usually like to start off with a little bit of an introduction. I guess tell me a little bit about the team behind Rev Racing, and
Mm.
I guess how you guys got started. How did you come up with the project of Rev Racing?
So Rev is one of the first Rev as the token, and then Rev Motorsport as the platform is one of the first kind of entries that Animoca Brands made into the blockchain space.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like one of the first tokens that the company directly launched. And it kind of laid a lot of groundwork, both technical groundwork as well as kind of our understandings for how we might be thinking about, okay, what can we do with NFTs and stuff like that. Rev Racing is essentially kind of one of the Rev Motorsport kind of titles. The way that we look at Rev Racing is that we wanted to build something. So I think a personal reference for the project when we think about the game itself is that we think kind of, okay, this is like, we wanted to make it so that it was less about the spend, which is quite different to a lot of kind of blockchain games that have
Yeah.
existed and some of the ones that we've done as well. And more about kind of focusing on the player themselves and kind of their performance really like dictating how well they do, right? So it's a very, very skill-based experience. And that works well within our larger portfolio of Rev Motorsport, which is essentially this ecosystem of different racing and driving experiences. Rev Motorsport is kind of like our Gran Turismo kind of send up of it being like a very physics based driving based experience where the cars have character, where learning how they handle is kind of how you get the most out of the game. And it's
Yeah.
still very early for sure. But like we're already kind of really leaning into the idea that this is very skill based, and it's really about kind of how the cars are different, how the tracks are different, and kind of like getting into that intimacy of how all these kind of work together. How all these work together is kind of how you get and extract the best out of that gameplay experience that we offer.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and you guys are a arcade simulation racing game on the
Mm.
blockchain, and all of the cars and assets in the games are NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the NFTs that are in the game?
So we have five. We've got five cars that are originals.
Mhm.
They're all NFTs right now. The vast majority of these cars. So we haven't sold any of these cars to date outside of some of the high tier cars that we've partnered with the NFAS team on.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of the supply right now, we've basically had them be kind of claimable through, engaging on social media, community events, and with kind of partners that we have access to through Animoca Brands. So we've done cars that are for the Sandbox community, we've done cars for the gaming community, for the tower community, and basically people like engaging in these events, social events, or certain liquidity events, they get access to cars. And yeah, all of these cars are NFTs, and they have kind of that NFT itself has that utility inside the Rev Racing game. That's the car that you drive.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And I guess when I think of some different like blockchain games, and I just think of the different ways they can make all the stuff in their NFTs. Do you guys ever plan on doing, I guess, like the arenas, like the racetracks, kind
Mm.
of like doing it like maybe like a land sale where people actually own the arenas, and or I guess the ad space in there, and
100%, yeah. So this is something we've done in the past with other kind of Rev Motorsport titles. Is essentially It was during 2020. I think it was 2020. Yeah. Or maybe, yeah, it was first late 2020 was the first time we did it, where people would be able to own a part of the track, and essentially through the ownership of that part of track, they would earn passive amounts of rev based on the amount of fees that are being brought in from players, right? So
Yeah.
for rev racing, we are going to be introducing a similar system, but think of it like a 2.0 version of that, but ultimately also scaling it so it works with everything that is Rev Motorsport and not just specifically Rev Racing.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, I feel like you know, a little brief overview of like what is Rev Motorsport? You know, you mentioned is like kind of the whole entire ecosystem that you guys are building. You know,
Sure.
what exactly is in this ecosystem for anyone watching that might not know?
So Rev Motorsport is currently comprised of a number of standalone titles, game titles, all of them on blockchain. Um, a core token, which is the Rev token,
Mm-hmm.
and then other kind of racing, motorsport, driving, competitive asset types and experiences. And this kind of expands. So as of today, Rev Motorsport is currently made up of MotoGP Ignition, which is an officially licensed MotoGP experience. Within that, we have soon to be releasing we call Card Champions, which is essentially like a kind of fantasy-like sport, which utilizes card NFTs to play. We are also within this summer releasing MotoGP management experience that is part of the Ignition platform. So MotoGP Ignition is one part of what we have. Another is Formula E. We've issued Formula E NFTs. We released 10 or 20 cars on Binance Smart Chain in the past. Those cars will actually be playable in Rev Racing as well in kind of the next few months. But that is an official Formula E racing title. It will also be a management simulation experience that will release towards the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Rev Racing, of course, exists here, which is the kind of arcade simulation thing where it's more skill based. So we have like these very kind of complementary experiences. We've got fantasy sports in Card Champions for those who just want to like for the fan experience, right? They love the sport. They just want to kind of get into it, no different than kind of fancy football, fancy basketball, and all the rest of it. We have management experiences. We've got light simulation experiences that we'll be doing with Formula E, which is kind of still management-esque. And then we have like the pure driving experiences like Rev Racing. And also we'll be adding Torque Motorsport, the drift titles into Rev Motorsport 2. And those are other kind of, very action skill-based games which focus on drifting.
Yeah.
And these are just like the four that we've really kind of launched or kind of spoken about more so than some of the stuff that we've got kind of, building in the back. But all of these titles, they share use for the Rev token itself.
Mm-hmm.
The ecosystem is cross-chain. We have MotoGP on the Flow blockchain. We have content on Ethereum. We've got Rev Racing, which is on Polygon. As mentioned, Formula E has cars on BSC, but will also be on Flow as well. And Rev is in all these places. And Rev Racing is kind of one of these that sits within Polygon that uses the Rev token and offers the skill-based experience, the first skill-based experience that we're building for Rev Motorsport.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I mean, sounds like you guys got a huge ecosystem going. And you know, the main thing that I think we want to talk about today is Rev Racing. You know, the game here it's currently in alpha, correct?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, we've kind of over the last few months, we've been working on modifying the physics engine,
Yeah.
which is super critical for this kind of game, and especially considering that we want to make it so that when you have the NFT, it's you will have like a high level of stats that are part of the metadata. So it's like, okay, this is the top speed rating, this is the acceleration rating, and stuff like that. But they're still somewhat abstract, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to really, the way that the engine will interpret those stats in kind of a fairly linear fashion, let's say. But there are other attributes to the cars that mean that you'll never know exactly how it's going to play until you drive it on the track. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what we want to be able to do anyway. because it's like it's the driving experience, right? As opposed to it saying, okay, I have this token and it's red and it's legendary, it means it's going to go 10 seconds faster. It's like, no, actually it's going to play very different. It's like, yes, it might be faster, the acceleration might have higher kick or whatever, but mate, can you drive it, right? And that's kind of a challenge for users. And I think ultimately for us, with this upcoming kind of physics update that we're putting in, we're pretty close now to getting our foundational physics base, which means that now the cars all feel though they're part of the same engine, whereas kind of previous versions they were still very idiosyncratic. But yeah, we're getting to a place now where everything feels like, yes, these feel like they exist within this same realm essentially.
Nice. And for anyone watching out there, I see Slater in chat saying he was going to pick some up. If someone wanted to play the Rev Racing Alpha, how would they go about doing that? What would they need?
So they definitely need a car, and there's around 150, 60,000 cars that we've minted so far on available to buy on OpenSea, like on Polygon as well. So you'll need like your Matic to pay for gas, and some people sell these in Rev. We've worked with OpenSea to support Rev there.
Nice.
And they range between, I guess, like $2 to $5, so they're very inexpensive right now. But that might change as we implement some features in the future that really utilize some of the unique liveries that exist. Because I think there's around 100 different livery types. So there's 5 primary cars, which all differ. So we have there's 2 of them which are kind of think of it as like a sports saloon, which has been somewhat tuned. So it's kind of, all-wheel drive. So it has pretty good grip. That's the Ambition and the Aspire. The Blur is a little bit different. It's a lighter car. So it should basically be a little more responsive, but maybe kind of also a little more twitchy, perhaps. Then we've got the RSX, SRX RSX, which is kind of like a higher end, think of it as like a mid-engine sports car, essentially. And then there's the OG, which is on a similar level, but it's another all-wheel drive kind of front engine thing. So it's more balanced, but probably not quite as fast. So they have these different driving profiles. So if you want the easiest beginner kind of experience, you want to go for an Ambition or potentially an Aspire. If you want to kind of compete immediately but be challenged by the driving experience, then you probably want to go and get hold of the SRX. I think it's the SRX, yeah, or the OG. Those 2 cars instead. But yeah, they're around $2 to $5 generally, I think, on the market. There will be more cars coming, but these cars are never going to be phased out. So you can start taking them, you can start driving with them, and we run competitions kind of. At the moment, we're running around 5 or 6 different competitions every day, and each one of those gives the opportunity to earn rev based on where you stand, where your standings are.
Awesome. Yeah. Because the next thing I was going to go on to is it is a play to earn game. I guess, $5 is a pretty low level of entry. There's a lot of play to earn games like that. It's like, oh, well, you got to have a full team and it's going to cost you $1,000 to even play the game. And it's like, it's a big risk. Whereas $5, anyone can go and get a car, try the game out. With the play to earn aspect, how much, if someone was to get a car and win one of these events tomorrow, how much rev token would they earn?
So if they get first, I think they're going to walk away with around 90 rev for winning if they play today. If they get first, depending on the scale of competition, right? So we've run many different event types. We've had events where we run it for the day, 24-hour event, and there's a 70,000 rev pool there for it. There are events where people will be able to get certain NFTs based on how they participate, based on where they place or what type of car they use to participate. I think there was something that we did back during Halloween. So this is a way that we leverage and kind of put out a lot of cool different liveries, is that we did play each day and receive a specific Halloween livery. And then I believe what it was is that if you play in the final event with one of those Halloween cars, you can earn the kind of seventh livery of this car sort of thing. And we do that stuff too. So it's like if you're playing, chances are through play, you're not only going to be able to earn the rev that's going to be there for prizes, there will be events where you earn NFTs as well. And kind of that helps you start really kind of building out your own collection of cars too.
Yeah. And also, you mentioned earlier that it's a skill based play to earn game. So that means I'm assuming that there's no free to play option for people that are wanting.
There's no free to play option. I mean, you can practice for free for sure, right? So if you want to get good at it, you go into practice and you can do, however many laps on the. I think right now we've got 2 circuits, but it makes up for 4 configurations, so you can practice on those different weather conditions as well. Get used to your car in the wet, get used to your car in the dry. And then for the current small events, it's a 1 rev fee to participate. For the larger events, when it's a 24-hour event or something, it's 5 rev to participate. So again, the entry fees are pretty low. We keep them pretty low. And I think ultimately, we're looking at, when we started doing rev racing, the thing that we wanted to do is make it accessible, right? Because we want more people to play. It's less about saying, okay, like here's a pretty hard paywall before you can enter. Ultimately, our focus right now is growth and really kind of mass market. And it's kind of, we can't go mass market if we need people to spend $1,000 to even experience something, right? So instead we say, hey, here's something you pay $2 for, or you kind of tweeted something on social media, hey, you've got a car, now you can come and play, right? And that's kind of the route that we're going with it to begin with.
Yeah, I think honestly that needs to be kind of the future of all this, even with like the 10,000 profile picture, like NFT collections, like to me, expecting people like want to buy an $1,000 profile picture, like is not realistic. Like I think there needs to be bigger collections where it is like, hundreds of thousands of items to where people can actually get in and participate in the collecting and playing the game. So I definitely think that's smart.
And I think one of the things as well is that when it is when it is so kind of hyper focused on a high kind of paywall essentially to enter the experience, then the focus switches like directly to how much am I going to earn, right?
Yeah.
And of course, this is one of the things that we provide or are allowed to do when we do kind of play to earn games. It's kind of, it is definitely a thing. But a lot of the time, like if the focus is so heavily in one way as opposed to the other, the gameplay becomes less of a factor. And that will kind of like, people will say, well, there's no point in building anything different considering people just want to earn the money anyway. So instead I'll just do some kind of faux staking platform and throw a bunch of tokens for people who buy a bunch of NFTs, right? And our overall growth is not that, right? That is like a very hyper specific thing. But overall, what we need to be looking at is essentially saying, hey, anybody can play this. The entry will get to a point where it's free. You won't be paying a dime to get in at all. But like there is something that exists that you earn alongside it. But also, I think sometimes what happens is that when the initial investments are made with NFTs and stuff, it can sometimes be forgotten that the assets that they've purchased to access the games still hold value. They're still assets as well, right? So it's not kind of, okay, I've spent all and no return. It's kind of, what am I going to get on top of the assets that I own too? So there's two, like, and definitely we need to balance rewarding early adopters in very reasonable ways, right? Because they're coming in, they're building it with us, and we need to kind of, and we appreciate that immensely, and we want to kind of show that as we can. And the idea is that they came in early on the journey and they can benefit from the growth. But it will fade away from that to become something that isn't this hyper, you get 200% APR or something like that. It's going to be something that is far more kind of level as it expands outwards and grows.
Yeah. And I wanted to move on to the next thing, which, is kind of the heart to the whole ecosystem, is the Rev token. We've been talking about it a lot. I guess what are the different utilities that come with the Rev token?
So you need it to, like, when we sell content, we sell it only in Rev, right?
Mhm.
So the idea is that you're playing, you're earning Rev, and that is ultimately leading you towards, obviously, if you choose to spend it, a way to access specific content that then lets you kind of play other kind of games and stuff like that, or other events with those cars that you spent Rev on. Rev is also an entry fee, and it's kind of the main prize. We will be kind of introducing a new token to basically allow earning to be more effort based as opposed to win based as we go
Mhm.
forwards. We're going to be introducing the shard, and the shard is also a Rev Motorsport token, right? It's not purely a Rev token. It's not purely a kind of Rev Racing token. It'll be across MotoGP Ignition as well. But it allows people to kind of like, we don't have to push too much focus on saying you need to win, you need to get top 10, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, okay, I'm a pretty average player. My skill level is not going to go up. I'm not going to get in the top 10. Sometimes people are too good, but I want to enjoy this, right? So instead, I'll earn a little bit of shard. Shard is going to have utility as well. I can spend it to, you know, also access certain types of content. But it's not the Rev token, right? The Rev token is always going to be okay for certain sales, you need Rev. For certain types of winning and event access, it is Rev. And I think one of the things too that we're looking to do with the introduction of shards and is essentially kind of make sure that the Rev that people hold is going to be kind of like maintain a more solid kind of value proposition, because we'll be issuing Rev at kind of a much slower rate as we go forwards too. But we've issued it as it has right now, again, because we want to be able to reward early adopters.
Nice, nice. And is there any I guess is there any staking with the NFTs or staking with the Rev token as of right now?
We right now live, no, but we have and we will be, right? So there'll be staking for race passes, probably after July, probably around September, October. Um, and they will also, like, the staking of Rev is something that we're looking at the moment. One of the things that we've kind of wanted, so we've done staking in the past where you've staked an NFT and you've earned an amount, right? And it works. But I think ultimately when we start looking at staking, the next time we want to look to implement it is to make sure that people who stake are seeding something else, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to it being essentially, okay, here's a deposit that I'm going to get a return from, right?
Yeah.
And that's all it is. And essentially what that does is it just grows this very, very narrow user base as well, which obviously, again, like, we want to reward those people who come in first. But ultimately, we need to make sure that those kind of events such as staking is seeding another aspect of growth. So stake here, a pool or a reward or a kind of a bump of some form happens due to that happening, right? That becomes
Mhm.
more important.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, and I did want to ask a question. I had
Mm,
a gaming question about
mm,
the mechanics of the game. You mentioned that or I saw in the video that there are actual cars such as like Mustangs or something. Say someone gets a Mustang, they really love Mustangs. Are they
mm.
able to upgrade that specific car in game through like new tires, engines, transmission, different things like that?
So that's something we've been going back and forward on a lot with Rev Racing specifically. There's a few things we've thought about doing, which essentially modularizes the construction of the car, right? And like one of the things that we've always wanted to do, and this isn't just, again, this is across the board, is make sure that everything we do is very on-chain focused, right? So any modularization that we would apply to the car, it would be something that we want to make sure is recognized on-chain, as
Yeah.
opposed to it being kind of abstracted just within a client or something. So these are things we're still thinking about the way to do this, where it can all robustly remain on chain, which means that the interoperability becomes kind of more immediate.
Hmm.
But then also, if we don't do it with Rev Racing, Drift do have customization. So that
Yeah.
version of that game is going to have this stuff. And then other versions of Rev Motorsport titles may leverage these cars and allow you to apply customization. And then in the future, maybe we let that cycle back around and Rev Racing says, hey, we see that you have these engines on, or this turbo been applied. All of that is an on-chain aspect. now we can interpret it into the game for Rev Racing as well.
Yeah, and I guess because as of right now, what from the videos I've been seeing playing, it's a kind of like it's a solo racing game, right? Like you're just trying to beat a track time.
For now, yeah.
And you guys have plans on doing like full blown, races with different cars on the track, right?
Yeah, so basically we have two things that we're looking at, like from a play perspective, that are in the works at the moment. One of them is the multiplayer. We currently target our internal demo within the next kind of, I think it's end of June we're aiming for, so we can start taking a look at how that looks. But multiplayer is definitely going to happen. And then also what we want to do is build out more PvE experiences as well, right? Not everybody wants to be competitive, which is fine.
Yeah.
So instead, what we want to do is we want to build things like we have a bunch of challenges that we call masteries, right? So if you have a car, that car is then going to have a bunch of single player challenges that you can basically, try and compete and kind of check off, right? So you get a new car, it's got a number 50 different masteries. Some of those masteries reward a little bit of shard, some of them will reward a little bit of rev, some would reward certain types of NFTs or certain types of materials. And those challenges would be, do a lap in this time, can you do the braking in this corner, can you take this section of the track without going off the actual circuit itself, can you beat this car, can you do the ghost time, stuff like that, right? So we'll build out PvE content alongside building out the PvP stuff in the form of the multiplayer.
Awesome. And like as far as the cars go, I know we had talked kind of like the different, there's like 4 different types of cars. I guess as the game goes on, there will probably be a meta that forms that there will be a best car.
There already is. There already is. Like,
yeah.
And it's kind of, the thing is because we're in these early kind of physics iterations, that meta has changed due to the engine changing, right?
Yeah.
Which has been pretty interesting. But yeah, there's definitely a meta there. People who want to kind of compete, they drive the SRX. That's the one they go to. But yeah, the meta's been formed for sure, and I think that will change when we apply the new physics engine. But also, we're going to start introducing new events that don't throw everybody in the same kind of sandbox, right? Where we say, hey, compete against everybody, whatever car, the best car is going to win with the best driver each time. Instead, it's actually, hey, you can't drive this car, you need this other car to participate. So we're going to kind of stretch that out a little bit more too.
Wow, yeah, I like that. It kind of, I don't know why it makes me think of like NBA Top Shot, where they kind of, not everyone's just collecting the LeBrons and the players like that. Like they come up with different events to make you want to maybe collect that player who's not a fan favorite. So yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you guys ever plan on doing, I guess, wagers? I don't know. I think of like Need for Speed, where you like race for pink slips.
We've had a few of those concepts going back and forward for sure. I think the only thing we're looking at ultimately is with that sort of stuff is again, we want to make sure it's a definite on-chain thing. So for something like this, for example, technically, like both of the cars get escrowed, and then ultimately the players play with like a proxy of the cars and stuff like that, and then the escrow releases both to the winner. So there are a few ways that we could do that technically. But like we've also thought about, okay, how can we kind of include rev as a prize and things like that. But when we come to that sort of stuff, we so some of the stuff that we've done that people tend not to like, but I think is ultimately the way we go anyway, is that we enforce KYC. And it's one of 2 reasons ultimately. One of them is to ensure that we get real players winning as much as we possibly can through this, and the second one is that we're kind of trying to future-proof ourselves, right? So anything when it comes to the idea of wagering and things like that, is that we take a very serious look at, okay, what does this mean within different regions of operation, right? Because we might be able to do a certain thing here, but if we do that in Japan, for example, that's a no-go. It's like, no, they'll, because Japan seems to interpret everything as gambling.
Yeah.
So like, there's certain things that we couldn't do, and it's okay, how do we then say, okay, only these users can do it and stuff like that? But yeah, the idea of racing for the cars themselves, like the pink slips and stuff, yeah, that's stuff we've been looking at for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. And then, what was this? Oh yeah, there is an option as well to where, you don't necessarily have to be, the racer. You can buy a car and then I guess sponsor someone to race your car for you, correct?
For sure. So we have a hired driver feature, which is currently in like even pre-alpha, right, at this stage. But ultimately, I think what this does is it's it's a very unique it's a very unique take on like the scholarship guild system in some ways, right? Where the power is actually towards the player as opposed to it being solely in the hands of the owner of the NFTs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you being the best player, not the one who can put in the most time, you being the best driver from a skill level means that your ability is able to earn you the best type of hires, right? And that's incredibly different to a lot of how guild systems and stuff work right now, where it's like, okay, we, like the NFT owners, the kind of asset holders, are going to leverage those who kind of basically put in time, right? So it's a
Yeah.
different proposition completely. And we are going to build that feature out because it is super interesting. And I think as well, this becomes more useful as we introduce some of our kind of fastest cars. So we
Mm-hmm.
have like, in addition to the 5 kind of common cars that exist right now, we've released one Apex car, which is the very, very top tier of car, and then we've released some legendary cars as well. And these are far faster and race ready than the current cars that exist. Um, and the thing is that people who buy those cars are not necessarily going to be able to drive them, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, and it becomes that kind of that scenario of, okay, like I'm going to hire the best driver to drive like this singly exclusive car, right? And again, the value of the driver is just as heavily weighted as the value of the car. So you as
Mm-hmm.
a player, as a skilled player, you still hold weight within like, you know, this negotiation dynamic there. And that's something that we want to do, is basically allow the earning to be a flexible thing that both driver and, hirer can kind of negotiate themselves. And think of it in a primitive fashion would be like, you can it'll be like a Craigslist of driver matching sort of thing. It's like, hey, I have this car, I'm looking for a driver. Maybe drivers say, I only drive Apex cars, right? That itself is an interesting proposition too.
Yeah. And when you guys release these new cars, is there like a limit to how many people can buy? Like, I guess, do you cap them at a certain mint amount?
Yes. So like we have a general kind of a high level concept, like scarcity model, right? So you can, and it's not like rigid, right? There's a margin here of a couple of percent here and there, but like in theory, you can take it as like a 50, 30, 15, 5 or something like that, where it's common, rare, epic, legendary. It'll tighten much, much more up on the epic and legendary, much more smaller, probably where legendary is more like a 2% issuance. And then
Mm-hmm.
outside of that, there are the apexes, which are very much singular issuances of cars that only ever exist once. Um, so like, we would maintain at least that supply scarcity. But the thing is as well is like, we're going to continue to mint common cars in abundance. So the scarcity itself isn't on pure number count. It's definitely relative to supply, right? So
Yeah.
like, whereas we look in the future, we want to have like tens of millions of common cars, which probably means that there's going to be over 1 million legendary cars, right? And that's kind of how it goes alongside the growth prospect.
Yeah. I guess something to do with, that supply. Have you guys ever thought of like I guess like a burning mechanism to where like if someone got into a wreck in a race, like their
Mm.
car is totaled and it's like it's just gone forever.
So there's a few things, right? So we've been looking at like, and it's like, basically wear and tear on cars.
Yeah.
It's kind of, okay, what happens if the car gets worn down? And it's balancing that. So it's like, yeah, of course we could do that, but then how favorable is that to the player, right? Or how do we make it favorable to the player that doesn't necessarily just mean now you've got to pay us more or buy another car, right? To
Mm-hmm.
make it make sense in certain
Yeah.
ways, right? Maybe if the wear made it kind of grow in certain value or something like that, or unlocked certain aspects that mean that yes, it's become more worn, but also it has allowed you to increase its, speed or reputation in some manner or some way like that. But we do have a system that we're still building right now, which we call the fusion system, which will mean that the cars don't necessarily get burned per se, but they do get pulled out of circulation. So what you'd be able to, you would take your car, let's say a regular, like the Sandbox Aspire, for example. No, it's the Sandbox Ambition, and you fuse it to become Sandbox Ambition GT. The original Ambition is then recycled out, and it's located in the junkyard. Some of these kind of fusions are going to require more than a single car to kind of complete the fusion. Some of them might require 2 cars, 3 cars, 5, or however many it is, right? So that doesn't necessarily burn them, but it recycles them. And the reason why we do a recycle is that we don't necessarily, I mean, we will see how the community wants it ultimately. But
Mm-hmm.
in the event that like a fusion requires a very scarce car, right? And
Yeah.
then new players come along later, I think new players and the community as a whole can vote to have the original components of that fusion to be released again. It doesn't mean we remint them. It's just they come from the junkyard and then they're reissued back onto the marketplace essentially. So we're very aware that we want to manage the supply in ways that make cars scarce, but also balance it to allow growth to really happen.
Yeah.
Because it's always scarcity is relative essentially.
And then Meta Win Media. So the always question interoperability in the future.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason for Rev Motorsport is that it is interoperable, right? It's again like so what we have in the pipeline right now with Rev Racing is the Formula E cars that will be issued from Formula E high voltage. Those will be playable within Rev Racing. We also will be including crypto motors cars that were previously auctioned in Rev. They will be playable in Rev Racing too. And then our track strategy is that some of the circuits we have, so we've already announced one licensed circuit. We have Hockenheimring. That will be playable not only in Rev Racing, but also in Drift and other titles as well. And then that kind of increases the value of that track land ecosystem that we'll be building as well at the same time.
Nice. Um, we talked about the events. You said you guys are doing, tons of events every day.
Hmm.
Um, as of right now, what is I guess the biggest tournament or event that you guys have held?
Uh, the biggest one, probably, I don't know if it was one of the first couple that we did, right? But we did a pretty big one the last couple of weeks, actually. So we recently did a Super Plastic event, which had a bunch of Super Plastic NFTs included as prizes. Prior to that, though, the biggest one was probably the Joey Logano event. So we did a 2-week event. That event basically allowed for, I think the total prize pools were just shy a million rev in total. Um, they were two kind of events. One was 4 days, I think. One was 5 days. And then there were kind of single day events in between the two big ones. Those events allowed you to earn cars that you could only get from the Joey Logano event.
Mm-hmm.
There was this big prize pool of rev across the 2-week period. And then we also had physical prizes too. So some of them were, some kind of small memorabilia items signed by Joey. There were a pair of his boots that I think he wore in the 2021 season as well. And then there's also the kind of top prize of the event overall was like a VIP pass, where they're able to actually go and view the races and stuff like that. One of the races of this kind of current season, I think it is. But yeah, we've done major events where we've issued like over a million rev for them as they've ran through 7 days. Events
Yeah.
that we've done in the past were like YGG as well. That was a huge event where we basically put 150k worth of rev and YGG token up for people who participated, plus ways to earn new cars from those events as well.
Wow. And now, yeah, we're seeing the Joey Logano
Mm.
promo run on screen here. I guess what other um because I've seen a CoinGecko car. What
Mhm.
other, I guess, major endorsements, or partners have you guys had?
So we have the Sandbox. So we've got the Joey car. We have a few. So we've got the NFAS cars are actually Alpine. So they're
Hmm.
actually like a French manufacturer who make cars anyway. Within the blockchain space, we've done YGG cars. We've done Avocado Guild cars. We've got a bunch of cars that are from the Animoca family. So cars for Tower, for Gamey, for Quid. We have done a lot of cars. We've done a bunch of cars with different kinds of podcasts and things like that. Trying to think if there's a big one that I'm missing. Yeah, we've done a lot. Like I think we've issued like 80 or 90 different liveries at least, or something like that. And this is
Wow.
kind of like, yeah, it's just one of the. It's ultimately a really cool thing because it's kind of a really good kind of cross promotion effort, right? Oh, we did a car for the Quick Swap guys. We did a car for the Ape Swap guys. Um, I think we did a sushi car, or we had a sushi car. But yeah, it's like this. We're kind of like it's a unique promotional tool for both kind of parties, right? Is that, hey, here's a car, and like we tie it into rev racing,
Hmm.
and also at the same time they're able to kind of engage a new user base because they can say, hey, like car sponsorship as it works right now, right? People pay to put their names on the side of cars so they can get exposure, and it works in the same manner in this way too.
Yeah. And have you had other NASCAR racers or any other professional drivers, I guess, reach out and ask you about the game and have
Yeah,
interest
so
in it?
we currently have under kind of the Rev Motorsport banner, we have an agreement with Juan Pablo Montoya as well. Uh, we have done, I don't know if we've issued it, but we do have a design for a Juan Pablo Montoya car. We also, on the motorbike side, we have a partnership with Brad Binder as well. And we've done some MotoGP tournaments. So that stuff happens as well. It does.
Hmm.
I think the Joey one is the most interesting one because, like, we've already done three cars. And again, like, he designed the Joey Logano circuit, right? Which is this very cool kind of thing that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know, before the show we were talking about during COVID there was a lot of professional drivers
Mm.
doing the driving simulations. So it'll definitely be able to. I think racing games are an untapped potential, and I think as we move more towards a digital landscape, you'll see a lot more uh, people experiencing just, I guess, VR, virtual reality
Mm.
racing and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. People understand it almost innately, right? The
Yeah.
idea of cars are so kind of ever present that being able to drive them in a virtual way, it's not the same proposition to get them to understand how to play a kind of card game or how to
Hmm.
play an RPG. Instead, it's like, oh, and you drive this.
Yeah.
And those people who otherwise would be put off by games, they can understand the premise of driving the car already. But also, as we've seen, non-gamers coming into the blockchain and NFT space because of the earning potential, right? So it positions this genre of game, the car racing game, or stuff that is understood, right? Sports in some ways as well. A unique way to get mass market exposure and bring in people who traditionally wouldn't care because of the unique earning opportunities.
Yeah. And this is I guess we never really talked about this. It's playable on PC, and you can either use mouse and keyboard or a controller, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you can use controller. It plays through the browser. So, like, the best experiences usually come with Chrome and Firefox. I think some people have been having pretty good performance with Edge recently as well.
Yeah.
Um, so it comes straight through the browser. It's MetaMask to connect. So we support MetaMask. We'll be supporting Wallet Connect soonish, I think, just to kind of extend its use. It is on Polygon, so transactions you're going to need Matic to be able to perform those transactions.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise, yeah, It's on desktop right now. You can obviously have a Mac. You can also run it from the same browser, Chrome and stuff like that. So yeah, and controller, keyboard. That's what you need.
Are you currently able to play with a plug-in steering wheel?
Not yet. That's not through choice, though. That's not through choice. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, we're working around some of the idiosyncrasies with like WebGL Unity and stuff like that. So like what upon prior to launch, steering wheel has always kind of been, can we get the steering wheel? It's like, okay, yeah, like we want to do the steering wheel. But it's when we figure out technically like those little things here and there, yeah, we'll be adding steering wheel for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And you know, you mentioned the Sandbox car, and we are hosting this show live from the Sandbox. So I do got to ask, you know, do you guys have any plans for the metaverse or even, you know, with Sandbox?
100%, yeah. So like even as like one of the first things that we did, one of the first collaborations we did with the Sandbox before we even did the Rev Racing car, is we did a unique LP pool. So you staked, you added liquidity in a RevSand pair on Uniswap. You got the LP token for your liquidity. You would stake it, and you would earn Sandbox NFTs that were Rev Racing themed. So we did like a bike, a Formula One car, a rider, and a driver, right? So it's 4 tokens in total, right? So
Yeah.
those assets exist. Also, kind of, you know, we are going to be building out on our own Sandbox land. What
Nice.
we want to do for kind of Rev Motorsport within that space, as well as like, you know, how we're going to also have like unique kind of explorable virtual spaces for Rev Motorsport proper, right? One of the things that we want to do, which is an obvious one, is, you know, explorable garages and stuff like that. People who have large collections, they can go there, look at their cars, look at their paraphernalia, look at all the racing memorabilia, their trophies and everything like that, and be able to kind of walk around, explore that, and then with the right levels of integration, interested people can bid for those items directly within those spaces too. So these are all things we're wanting to explore.
Nice. So you guys currently own land in the Sandbox?
We do, yes, we do.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, I could definitely see whenever they finally add the live streaming capabilities where you could watch things. Like I could see you broadcasting Rev Racing races, you know, live to the Sandbox. That would be awesome.
Exactly right. And it's kind of what it is for us is obviously like this alternate type of participant, right? Where they may not want to kind of drive, but maybe, you know, they are an owner and they've hired a couple of drivers, and then they go in the Sandbox and watch their drivers perform, right? That
Yeah.
is kind of this cool concept that can exist. So yeah, there's a lot that we want to explore with the Sandbox for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm excited to see where the game goes. I usually ask people that are on the show, you know, where do you see Rev Racing 3 to 6 months from now?
3 to 6 months. So 3 to 6 months, we will have fully functioning multiplayer. We will have our track land ownership system in place. So track owners will be able to leverage, like, you know, the rewards from owning a track, as well as the creation of events from owning a track.
Mm-hmm.
We will be having much richer PVE experience where, you know, people who do not want to compete directly have a bunch of ways that they can go car by car, unlock rewards, use them in fusions, and have kind of a very solo progressional experience as well, alongside people who are doing this PvP multiplayer stuff. And then also like a far kind of broader range of cars are going to be playable, right? We want to be aiming to have like, you know, we're not looking to top this out at 20 cars. We're wanting to include like, you know, in the hundreds of cars, right? That's where we're aiming. So it's a more aggressive cadence of cars being added to the game too. And then there's a few things that are part of this roadmap, which is how, and this is more a Rev Motorsport thing overall, but what is the driver, the participant, like the athlete within this ecosystem, and
Yeah.
how that will build out. And then alongside that, we are also looking at building out the technologies required to have these run seamlessly as fully downloadable clients, right? So you don't need to be attached to a browser anymore. Instead, it's kind of run directly from your PC or run directly from your mobile, and you're having an experience that doesn't require you to kind of have this browser plugin keep kind of popping up and stuff.
Yeah, nice. And you know, I guess I wanted to ask you. Talked about having, you know, who is the driver. That means like you're talking like having where people could have their own avatars in game, right?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it's where you as kind of you represent yourself with in whatever kind of profile, and we will support multiple profile pictures as well, stuff like that. We'll be doing that stuff, but it's kind of your legacy as a participant across the ecosystem, right? It's that if you have been a successful manager in MotoGP Ignition, Rev Racing should represent that in some capacity for you as a driver or even an owner of cars, right?
Yeah.
And that legacy is then transferable or at least recognizable across the wider ecosystem. And it kind of caters for owners, for managers, and for drivers in very specific types of ways. And that resonates across. So, hey, you're the best Rev Racing driver. What does that mean for your drift driver profile, right? Does that mean people are already there to sign you up because they know that you've been like this thorough kind of consistent driver in the Rev Racing ecosystem, and they can explore and see what your achievements have been, right? And that's kind of how we end up looking at building out players and users as kind of major components within the bigger ecosystem.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably a little early to ask this, but you know, do you guys have any plans for like esports? I guess like a Rev Racing league or just a you know, a league throughout the whole ecosystem where you involve different esports organizations.
For sure. I mean, like in some ways, we've already. I think what we kind of do as it is right now is that any blockchain game that is rewarding in some capacity in a competitive kind of environment, they've done a spin-off of what traditional esports is thought to be, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of it's pretty known, I think, that esports is, although is aggressively visible in some spaces, its overall growth has not been too explosive, right? I think there have been just as many failure stories as there have been success stories within esports, like leagues have to close and things like that.
Yeah.
So now instead, there's like this alternate where, you know, rather than saying, okay, we need a big arena and all the rest of it, for now, what we're able to enable is smaller pockets of these competitions to exist, right? And maybe that takes its own life form as it moves forward, where it's like, okay, these are more community driven, but facilitated by ecosystems in different ways, and that becomes parts of esport. The thing is that someone today, they don't need to put aside, you know, within Rev Racing, they don't need to put aside kind of like their life essentially to be able to have a shot at possibly being signed by an esports team. Instead, they can spend a couple of hours every day and compete against like players, right? And also compete for prizes and winnings. And that's just a new paradigm in how we can look at kind of esports overall. I think we're still exploring what that means, but it's not necessarily arena Dota or arena Valorant or whatever it is. It's like there's this other kind of space that can operate too.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, you know, that's pretty much everything I got. If you feel like there's anything that we didn't go over that you'd like to talk about, then, you know, let me know.
No, I mean, I would say that just very briefly, Rev Racing, we are probably close to introducing the Hong Kong circuit within the next 3 weeks. So that's the latest track. We are also going to we have around three or four new cars that we're probably going to be introducing over the next kind of 6 weeks or so. So yeah, there's a lot that's going to be coming for sure. A lot of stuff.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on today and sharing your thoughts with Rev Racing. And like I said, the game looks amazing just from already the alpha clips of the video. So I'm excited to see the progression of the game as it goes on. I want to thank everyone for watching today in the stream. Make sure you guys are following, you know, in the Discord. Check out revmotorsport.com. You know, check out their whole entire ecosystem, everything that they got going on and building. Learn about the Rev token. and follow them on Twitter. Also, make sure you're following the live stream. We will be live again tomorrow around the same time, or not the same time. 12 o'clock Eastern should be our normal time. And yeah, once again, Sean, thank you very much for chatting with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for inviting me along. This has been a blast.
Thank you. Everyone have a great night.
Thanks.